Okay, so we are at the part where we're just getting started with the course, and we need to get some web tools. Since I don't expect everybody has access to a full computer that can install an FTP client, file transfer protocol client, things like that, and more than likely maybe you have a Chromebook or something like that, then we need to use some free web tools. We're going to be using a couple of pages, one more than the other. But they're both good to have. The one that we will be using and depending on the most is going to be GitHub. I do have some links in your class, whatever class it may be you're taking right now. And the other one is CodePen. Now, GitHub for sure, you need to create your own account. Otherwise, it doesn't really work. CodePen is a little bit more freeform. You can use it without necessarily signing in, but if you want to save your stuff there and get some additional help from them, they're a pretty good site. I'd recommend creating your own account there as well. So let's get started. I'm gonna start with GitHub. That's the big one. Like I said, I can either click on the link that'll take me there, or I can just create a new get a new tab and say take me to github.com. Now, there's going to be multiple sites, or rather multiple instances of GitHub that we'll be using. GitHub.com is the part of the site that manages your account, that manages files, that gets a lot of stuff going. People will ask you, well, what's your GitHub account? I like right now I have one in mind because I'm going to create a new account for this video series. I wonder if I already have one. It's called idtprof. If I go and say github.com/idtprof, press enter, I can see then that yes, that's me. That's my ugly mug right there, and I can see the files there that I've done and how much I've contributed over the past year. Now, take this in mind, is that all the files that you put into GitHub, they're publicly available. idtprof's been around for a few years, and even though I'm not even signed in, I've already signed up and I have already committed several repositories, several places for several classes where I have put in my files. So I'm not going to be using this account for this particular video series. Instead, I want to use something else, something easy for me to remember right now. So I'll see if idtsu20 is available. And I get a 404 page. It's not the page you were looking for. That tells me that nobody's using this. So this might be a good account to create. Now, F. Rodriguez was already taken. That's why I ended up with idtprof. So you come up with something that maybe makes sense to you. Maybe your first initial and your last name, a combination of those two, or whatever else is class appropriate that you can get going on. I'm going to sign up for this, and it's remembering that I am already idtprof. I don't want to create this one again, so I'm just going to delete the stuff that was there. My username, I think it's going to be idtsu20, and it's available. Gives me the green light. And email address. Now, this is something to remember. Remember your address. Remember what you're using. I strongly recommend that you only use one email address for your your GitHub use. If you go back and say, hey, I'm going to create another username and it's going to be idtsu21 or whatever else it may be, and I give them the same email address, maybe it'll let me do it, but eventually GitHub sort of gets tired and says, hey, this is a free service. You should really only have one. And if you have multiple ones, make sure that you have multiple email accounts, that you have multiple people doing this. So the email address that I'm going to use, because I have access to my own server, it's going to be idtsu@paco.org, because I can control that. And the password that I pick here is the password that I will have for my account. Be sure that you write it down somewhere, that you remember it, that you commit it to memory. Don't lose it. I'm going to use my password there. I'm going to scroll down and see what else I need to do. Email preferences. Send me occasional product updates, announcements, and offers. GitHub doesn't really send out much, so I'm just going to leave that turned on. If they do send something, it may be important. I'm going to verify that I am a human by working that puzzle. It's not very hard. Scroll down, and then I'm going to create my account. So while it's doing that, it's going to give me a chance to save the password, and I'll save it. I know what it is. I have it written down somewhere. There's a quick questionnaire. You don't have to participate in this. I just like to say something. If you want to say that you're a student, that's fine. You don't need to do anything. I am a teacher, so I'll put there that I am a teacher, and I do some things with software. I do write code. I'll just leave. I think it only allows me to write one, so I'll put in teacher. How much programming experience do you have? Well, I have some. I would say I have a moderate amount. If you have none, there's no shame in that. They will not shame you and find you and say, hey, what are you doing here? No, they will not. So just whatever your experience is, that's fine. What do you plan to use GitHub for? And I'm always learning to code, so I'll click on that. I also want to create a website with GitHub pages, and maybe I want to learn more about GitHub, and I want to host a project. Yeah, well, actually, now I'm running out. I only let you have 3. So we're going to be learning to code. We're going to be learning GitHub. Most importantly, though, we're going to host a project. So I'll select those. I am interested in, and I've already answered this before. If you want to answer that, fine. If you don't, I think you can just keep on going. I'm going to complete the setup. And it says, okay, verify your email address. Remember I told you, make sure that you have access to this email, that it's yours, and that you're the only one that uses it. I just made up that one there, but I do have access to it. So email containing, it's going to be sent to that email address that I provided. I'm looking at another device right now so that it tells me what's going on. And yes, I see it here. I have a please verify your email address, and it gave me a link. It says verify your email address, and it's taking me to GitHub, where it's asking me to sign in again. And while, like I said, this is on a different device, I'll share what's going on with you. It's not that one. It's going to be the one I just created, and I said it was going to be idtsu20 well, actually, that's my username. Make sure that you remember also your username. idtsu20 is my username. That's what I created. And then the password that I gave it just before, that I remember. I'm signing in, and now it's asking me if I want to remember my password. Not necessarily, because, like I said, this is a different device. I want to move that device out of the way, and it's telling me, well, what do you want to do first over here? So let me see if it will let me come back to verify, and it's already telling me that it's 404. So instead, I'm going to go back to github.com, see what it remembers, and then, well, it remembers that I am idtsu20, and it's telling me, hey, do you want to create your first project? And that is something that you should do. Like I said, maybe it's asking you, what do you want to do first? So if you don't, this is what it looks like. So we're going to create a repository first, and I'm going to ignore this other thing. If you want to learn how to use GitHub, by all means, take the chance to do that when you can. Going to try to teach you as much as you need for the class here. So I said we do want to create a new repository, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a repository. If you see a different button that says create a repository, like the blue one that I showed you just now, then you should go there as well. So the owner, it's going to be me. This is my username, the one that I created just now, idtsu20, and I need to create a repository name. And this is very important that you do this exactly the way that I explain it. And I skipped a step, and I'm going to try to put it in the notes in your class. idtsu20 is very deliberate the way that I typed it. It's in all lowercase. I would not mix uppercase and lowercase with file names, with usernames, anywhere. If you are an expert and you can remember that, oh yes, I use a shift key here and I did a capital letter there, an underscore there, whatever, fine. But to keep things simple, which is usually a good rule to follow, I always use lowercase, only lowercase. If your name is, like mine is Francisco Rodriguez, if I wanted to create a username, I would say F. Rodriguez, like that, and it tells me, oh, that's available, but that's the repository, and that's fine. I can create whatever repository I want. What I was getting at is that I would not say capital F, capital R Rodriguez, because then when we're shifting navigation back and forth, if you don't have exactly the uppercase lowercase combination, it's not going to find it. So and most importantly, the repository name that I need to create to host my website needs to be the same as my username, idtsu20. No spaces anywhere, okay? Not in file names, and not in repository names, and not in usernames. Don't recommend it at all. idtsu20, and because this is a subdomain that I'm creating, .github. And remember I told you there was going to be multiple uses of GitHub. We were in github.com. We still are. But my files are going to be hosted somewhere else. They're going to be hosted in github.io. So I got a check mark saying this is a valid name. idtsu20.github.io. It's a repetition here because it's idtsu20 and then / idtsu20.github.io. Well, yes, but that's what we need. We need to have the repository name start with the same name as the owner. You can describe that if you want. I'm just going to say this is my space for a class website, or whatever you want to put there. That's class appropriate. That would be fine. It's going to be public, and I leave it as public because private, basically, it's going to cost you money later if you want to grow, etc. But it's public, and like I said, anybody can see this. And I want to be able to see your files. If that would be good for you if you want me to grade them. So leave it as public. I'm going to initialize this repository with a README, and that's just so that so that I can have a README file. And I'll let you know when it pops up what the README is, and I will now create the repository. So all the information that I've given it is taking it and it's creating this new repository. Are you familiar with file management? Have you ever saved files to your computer at work, at school, at home? At home, maybe you have a Windows computer and you saved it to your downloads folder. If you have a Macintosh, you did the same thing. If you have a Linux box, you may have also downloaded it to your downloads folder. Well, that downloads folder that I keep on harping about, that's a repository. That's a place where files live. So basically, we have created a big folder where we're going to keep all the files that we need for your class. So depending on what class this is, maybe you have already taken Web 1. Remember Web 1? You created an HTML folder somewhere, and then you uploaded it somewhere else. Well, GitHub, it's all in the same place. So this is basically your public HTML, your home folder, whatever you want to call it. This is your home repository. This is where your website will live. So GitHub Actions, that's just telling me something new that's come up. I'm going to dismiss. I'm not going to set up actions. Remember, we created a README file. Well, the README file is just a repetition of what we're doing with this. So readme.md. The .md means it's markdown, and that is a different language than markup, which is what this class will entail. We're going to be working with markup languages. Where have I heard the word markup before? Well, HTML files, hypertext markup language, HTML. That's what we're going to be saving here mostly. Depending on what class this is, we might be using some MD files, some markdown files, and that's down the road. So what am I going to do with this now? Well, itsu20.github.io, this right here, as it turns out, this is my new website. It doesn't exist yet. I'm going to highlight that and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to create a new tab and I'm going to paste what I just copied. It would help to remember this, and I remember it, idtsu20.github.io. It's not .com, it's .io. .io being for, because geeks like IO, it's input output, things that you would do with computers. And it's free. It's mine now, so I'll just press enter to see what happens. Well, actually it tells me it's giving me the README file, so it's giving me a little bit of introduction to what's going on with my server. Is this good enough? Well, if you get this far, you're doing fine. But I want you to go one step beyond this, because now that you have this readme.md file, well, we're working with HTML. So let's create your first file. It's going to be an index file, which is always fun, isn't it? Guess what it's going to say? I'll give you 3 guesses, and the first 2 don't count. And hopefully all 3 of them, this is going to say hello world somewhere along the way. So I'm going to create a new file. The button is right here. And notice I didn't really tell you where to do it, because there's not too many places to do it. This is your home folder, idtsu20.github.io. I'm going to create a file, and it's going to be called index.html. Not comma, .html. And it's all one word. There's no spaces. There's no capital letters. Remember that, please. And I'm going to scroll down. And what's this blank space here with the number 1? Well, 1 is just the line number where you're at. You're in the first line. If you keep on scrolling down, you will commit a new file eventually. You can give it a description, and then there's the screen button that does lots of stuff. Actually, only does one thing. It saves it, and then cancel just would let us out. Let's scroll back up. What is this big blank space? Well, if you've used Notepad before on a work or school computer, that's how you would put in your code. This is how we put in our code in github.com. We put it into this editor. So I'm assuming, once again, that you've already taken HTML. So this should not surprise you that I'm going to say, hey, here's my H1 as a header. And can I make this a little bit larger? I can, maybe if I do the Control+, yes. And I'm just basically making my browser a little bit larger. And I'm going to say my name, or do I put in my name? Sure, why not? Put it in my name here. And I say Francisco's page. Close that header. So angle brackets and H1 to start, angle brackets / H1 to end. And then I'm going to say, not index, I'm going to put in a paragraph. The paragraph is going to say, hello world. I told you. Exclamation point. This is my web page. And close that paragraph, angle brackets / P. And I think that that'll do it for now. So I'm going to scroll down. I told you about this commute new file. You are able to see some grayed out comments here, create index.html. This is an actual comment that somebody already put there for you. By somebody, I mean the machine, the computer. This is what you've done. You created the index file. If you want to change this, you can. There's no need to, but if you want to say, hey, I created this file for my HTML class. And then you can have an extended description if you want to go on and on and on about whatever, all the stuff that I've talked about, but there's really no need. I'm going to commit directly to the master branch. More than likely, for this kind of class, we will only be using the master branch. And then green button, I'm going to commit the new file. I'm clicking on it. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I don't need the big type anymore that much. So, okay, so I can see a little bit more of the code. I'm scrolling down. And what's happened is I created a new file. It's called index.html. And here I have this folder, basically, that is the equivalent of my public HTML folder from back in Web 1. Maybe you remember that. If you use something else, maybe you don't. Maybe use a GitHub account. Maybe you created a new one. I hope that if you already had a GitHub account that you created a new one, because if you need to move files around, I could show you, but that's going to be a whole different series of videos, and I really want to avoid that. So I'll scroll down, and here's the index file that I just created. It tells me, well, when was this done? Well, the README, along with the account, was created 6 minutes ago. Index.html was created a little while ago. Actually, it was created like now. It's been a minute or two. If I click on index.html, my extensive code that I've created, and by extensive, yes, I am being facetious. Let me see, it's not telling me. Okay, here you go. It'll show it to me. Here's Francisco's page is an H1, and Hello World is my web page. And you remember from Y1 that, or any class you've had before, that there's more code that needs to go here. And we'll add some more code for now. I just want to make sure that you have a web page. Well, you may be asking, don't I already have a page that says idtsu20.github.io? Let me reload this and see what happens. Well, the code that I put in, my H1 and the paragraph, is now what's on the page because I have a website that runs on github.com that has the address idtsu20.github.io, and this is what I want. This is the page that you're going to be working with. Later on, we're going to be creating new folders that go into your repository, which, by the way, you can always go to by clicking on the name of the repository. Mine is idtsu20.github.io. Later on in this and many other videos, I will say username.github.io. This is what I mean, your username.github.io. And I can open up the all the branches, or rather all the files that are open here. I'll show you how to create new folders and put in new index files when we navigate, and we'll just review a little bit about HTML and CSS from your previous classes, and then we'll be on to bigger and greater projects. Make sure that you remember, once again, this right here, github.com/idtsu20/idtsu20.github.io, or as I like to call it, github.com/username/username.github.io. This is not the web page. Whenever I ask you in assignments that I'm asking for this one. This is your page. This is your username.github.io. This is the one that I want. Eventually we'll have folders here that may have names like 000 for a folder because that's the first one, and then another index page. This does not exist, but when I'm asking you for a file that belongs to your website, I expect to see something like this later. At any rate, I've gone on too long already, I think, about how to create your first web page. What's true is that you have created a GitHub account. Make sure that when you turn in your address, you give me your username. Actually, yes. Well, this is I regress here, because if you do send me, because the instructions say so, github.com, and then I say okay, idtsu20. And that's what I asked for, I'll accept it. But know that this is not necessarily your web page. This is not a web page that you want to go back and navigate to. So if you send me this one instead, the one that's just the username .github.io, I'll accept that one as well. Okay, so you also, for this assignment that I'm harping about here, you need a CodePen account. I'll click on that and go to codepen.io. And CodePen.io is basically a very nifty way of coding in your HTML pages. So I'm going to sign up real quick here. And now that I have a GitHub account, I'm going to say, hey, it's free, right? And I'm going to sign up with GitHub. Click on that. And it already knows that I am idtsu20, so I'll authorize that. And I'm going to redirect it, so it's throw it around somewhere in the internet, and finally we got here. So my username is now idtsu20. I'm on CodePen. Here I can add a location if I want, a little bio, etc. I can add some links. I don't really need to do this. Not right now. Maybe I'll do this later. Maybe I'll put in an avatar like I have on GitHub somewhere else. But you don't really need to do this just yet. I can, just for kicks, I can say, hey, I want to create a new pen. This is what they call their projects here. And I'll show you later what we're going to be doing with this. Basically, and I don't like this HTML, CSS, .js all stacked. Or do I? Maybe I do like that. Actually, if you see it all the way across the top, that's what I don't like. I like this stacked like this. Maybe remember something from another time I was here. If I scroll this, I don't need JavaScript right now, and I don't need CSS just yet, but HTML. Remember this? h1, and then Francisco's page slash h1, and then whatever else I have. Notice how as I'm typing it, you see what's going on to the right away. I'll put in a paragraph and I'll say, this is my web page for my HTML class, or whatever I put in the other one, and close the paragraph. So once again, I have h1 on top, I have paragraph here, and it's all coming out very quickly. I'm going to go back and see my GitHub page. If I look at the page source, that is the code that I put in, I'm going to press Control A to select everything, Control C. You don't have to do this, I'm just showing it. And come back here and paste it, and the same thing happens. So later on, maybe you want to see what you're coding, and you'll be able to just copy and paste your code straight into your GitHub account. That'll come in handy later. It told me that I had not saved all the time that I'm here. Maybe I want to call this, see, cancel that. I'm going to press on the little pencil here to do an edit, and I'll call this index.html. I think I can only have one index.html, but for now that's what it's going to be called, and it's saved. And all that tells me is that the next time that I sign into this account, there will be a project, or a pen rather, that's called index.html, and it will have it saved. So it's good to have files saved here as well. So now I have this, and it tells you here it's going to be codepen.io / whatever your username is. So why don't I go then to that? I'll say codepen.io / and it'll be idtsu20, and it takes me to my account, idtsu20, and I have one pen, it's this one, and it's showing it to me. So this right here, that's what I want you to turn in. It's your codepen.io / your username. So by now you should have a CodePen and a GitHub account. If you're taking this course, and hopefully you are if you're watching this video, click on the assignment name, and where it says write submission, you can, well, don't paste this code. The username from GitHub, if you put in the GitHub first or the CodePen first, that's fine. And go to the next line, and let's see, my GitHub account. And I said that because I did not specifically say otherwise, that if you want to give me this one, which is your actual page that you'll be working on, or if you already sent me this other one, the one that is just github.com and the username, that's fine. But from now on, and I will specify in the following videos, that you need to send me the .io as opposed to the .com. So don't send me all three, I don't need all three. But if you send me either one of the GitHubs, that's fine. And then when you're done, just click on submit, and that'll turn it in, and something will go off on my phone that says, hey, a student turned in something. I'll go in and check it. If you have any questions, always please email me, follow the directions on eCampus, and I'll see you in the next video.